should be working. Welcome to Archipelago. Celeste has a randomizer. I think more than one, actually. So it's 2294. But the Archipelago one is pretty interesting, in my opinion. And there's a thing about it that I don't quite like. I've got a rando open with a lot of settings activated. Pretty much every strawberry, cassette tape, crystal heart, key, pair of binoculars, car, everything's randomized. But as you can see, there's only 14 checks in logic. Well, that seems a little silly to me. You know what I don't see in here? Okay, I see Forsaken City A, Room 3, Strawberry. That's the only thing in Forsaken City. Well, let's see about that, right? Okay. So it's pretty easy to jump up this first room, but then, oh no, I don't have a spring. Well, that's no big deal. I can just dash across anyways. And then the same thing goes for here. This is the strawberry that it says is in logic. But did you notice that if we restart the chapter, it said that this strawberry right here is unobtainable? Well, yeah, duh, there's no spring here, right? Like, are we kidding? You can't dash precisely? Why do we need springs to get this strawberry? Like, this isn't even tech. This is just playing the game. I'm gonna turn my music down a bit. I'm a little worried my voice isn't gonna come through very clearly. But, like, that's not all. Why does it say that it ends there? Well, there's a traffic block in this room, and we don't have those yet. Thankfully, crumbling platforms aren't a check you have to pick up. There's obviously more than one way you can get that one. And then we reach here, and, you know, sure, you can't jump up. You could dash up. You don't even have to leave the ground to do the dash. And then you just wall jump 3 times. Or better yet, you can do a wall bounce. Like, it's not really that hard to collect stuff without, using the gameplay mechanics. Like, okay, there's a strawberry in the corner there. There's a few different ways you could go about doing it. You could super. That would work. Maybe that's a little precise. You could hyper. That would also work. You could just jump across. Well, if I didn't suck, you could jump across. But you get the idea, right? So that's what the point of what I'm hoping will be a 9-part series will be, is going through the whole game and trying to either find out if you can get certain checks without items, or if you can't, what items you need. Because a lot of this is not complicated tech at all. So this room, you're expected to use a dash crystal. We don't have them. And it's that easy. Same goes for this room. You're supposed to use a dash crystal and a spring. And then here, you're also supposed to use a dash crystal. Well, you don't even need to dash to do this room for the, like, in the first place. But, you know, there's a lot of ways you can get around doing this. Like a corner boost. Or that. And here, again, you can do this room dashless. You don't need a dash crystal. Now, coming up is going to be something that actually is a little interesting. First of all, getting heat up there is a little bit complicated. You can try to cheese it with a screen transition like that. Or you can do an honestly pretty tight wall bounce. It's not impossible by any means, but then we get to this. This is what I'd call an explicit requirement. You are not getting past this without traffic blocks. Doesn't matter how many times I cling to it, the traffic block's not going to activate. So, it's not like you can full clear Forsaken City without the traffic blocks. But you can do a lot of it. Like over here, I'm supposed to use some springs. Or I could jump and dash. Now, here's one that I haven't found a solution for yet. Because it's not that difficult to grab the strawberry, but to actually make it back to safe ground with it, I haven't found a way to do so. If that were possible, I'd pretty much need to have a dash on the wall, and, like, even then, like, I can do this, and I can get here. Oh. Wow, that's tight. Most of these rooms are pretty self-explanatory, I feel. Neutral wall jumps, like I did just there, can also help a lot with managing stamina. This strawberry is literally nerfed by not having traffic blocks. This one's kinda cool. 'Cause you can't dash up here, because you need your dash afterwards. So instead, you gotta do something like that, then that, that, and then kick off the wall. And then over here, pretty easy, but like obviously you can get to safe ground pretty easily by just going backwards. But how do you advance? Oh. Huh. I thought you had to do a funny thing like that, but nope, you can totally just dash up. And then this one's also pretty interesting. It's very easy to just get to the next room, but getting the check here requires that really, really tight wall bounce. You don't need to be perfectly on top of a wall to get a wall bounce off. And I'm pretty sure those, like, extra 3 pixels are needed to get this strawberry. But it is doable. It's just a little bit on the difficult side. Keep in mind, I've gotten like 20 checks, and all but one of them aren't in logic. And I'm not saying that all of them should be, but I feel like it should be a setting. A great example is Hollow Knight. Hollow Knight's got a bunch of settings for skips. So like, maybe you're pretty comfortable with the combat in the game, or pogoing off of a background object. You can turn those skips on, but leave some of the more difficult skips off, like shriek pogos and spike tunnels. Maybe you don't like dark rooms. I know I don't. Dark rooms is one of the few ones that I pretty much keep off all the time. And just like that, finally got the wall bounce. This strawberry. Yeah. Now, the next 2 things are actually pretty interesting, because while it is pretty easy to get into the next room, going to either of these side paths is tricky. You don't have this traffic block to fling you to the other side. And sure, you can fling yourself, but it's a winged strawberry. So what can you do? Well, this is a room transition. You get your dash back when you go through a room transition. So, you can fling yourself through the room transition, and then collect the strawberry. Okay, but what about this, right? This is surely impossible. This traffic block's completely blocking the way. There's no way through. And, sure, like, no matter how precise you time it, you are not fitting Madeline's whole hitbox through here. But I mean, we can turn hitboxes on, and you can see that there's, oh, what is that? A 5 pixel gap? Something like that. Honestly, probably more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, 5 pixel gap. Well, when Madeline's crouching, you can only see it for a brief moment here before my movement gets cancelled, but her hitbox is only 4 pixels tall when she's crouching. And you can crouch dash. Now, it's a little more complicated than that. You need to be going at it straight on. So you can't do a diagonal demo dash like I tried there, but what you can do is this. If you time it just right, with a straight dash, you can get through that gap. And then you can go up here. This is another explicit requirement, as far as I can tell. I have found that you can double tap jump right there, and you can do a kick off of the spike wall, but I still, even with that, don't see a way to close out the last 2 blocks. So I'm fairly certain you need the traffic block to get up there. This, on the other hand, like, come on. So then we can go up here. Again, the room can be done dashless, so you don't need the dash crystal. This room can also easily be done without the traffic block. You don't even have to go up the left side if that seems too precarious for you. You can just do something like that. And then there's this one. This one and the one that I saw before were the only strawberry rooms that I could get to that I couldn't figure out a way to actually collect the strawberry. And it's honestly even more grim in this one. Because obviously you can't get back from the strawberry if you don't have a dash, so you need to be at the strawberry with a dash. And, I mean, good luck. You can climb up here, but you don't get enough, horizontal distance. You can try jumping instead, and that'd get you a bit closer. But even if you do, it's a 6 tile. So, even though I'm here, I still have to dash across. And it's not impossible to get past the 6 tile without dashing, but you need to be coming at it with momentum in order to do it. And it helps a lot to do a double jump. So, while it's not impossible to get to the strawberry, as far as I'm aware, it's impossible to collect it. Then there's this room, and this room is interesting because while there is a way to do this room dashless, it actually relies on both springs and traffic blocks. So you're gonna have to find something more creative. Well, you can try using the screen transition, and that can get you onto that traffic block with a dash. And then if you do some fairly precise movement, you can cling on to that wall. If you don't like that though, instead you can, I believe, do some kind of either a corner boost or a screen transition hyper. Okay, I don't think a corner boost is going to get you very far, but you could do something like that, maybe. Well, maybe not, honestly. Well, you could just do an actual hyper. And an actual hyper will get you over here. then you have to do a 4-tile overhang, which, if you've ever done Dashless 1A, you know that this trick's, like, really more annoying than difficult. You kinda just gotta throw yourself at it until something sticks. Regardless, I've already shown one way that you can get up, so I don't see a reason to show another. Well, maybe I do, because I can't seem to redo the other one. There's the 4-tile overhang route. And then you can get up top, and usually there'll be a check for completing the level. So, despite the fact that it said I could get one check here, I got 18. So there's also the B and C sides, and yeah, no. I mean, you can do stuff in them, but like, even supposing I could find a way to get under this traffic block and then live afterwards, there's still the rest of the level. C-sides generally don't even have very many checks. It's usually a pair of binoculars and level completion. B-sides, however, have both level completion and the crystal heart. And if you have checkpoint sanity on, they also have the checkpoint checks. Now obviously doing B-sides without any movement options is going to be way harder than doing any of the A-sides. But that doesn't mean it's impossible. So like something like this looks pretty bad. You can get here with a dash. And because of that, you can get through this whole room. This room, on the other hand, I don't know about. I do think this is the end of the line for the B-sides of Forsaken City without traffic blocks. Like, there's a few ideas here, but pretty much all of them seem like duds to me. The furthest I can really see you getting is right there. So, okay. That was a lot of stuff that I could get without any checks at all. What can I get with checks? Well, there were 3 strawberries and a B-sides tape that I missed in Chapter 1. One of those strawberries needed dash crystals, and the remainder all needed traffic blocks. I'd also take a moment to mention here that it is an option in the rando to randomize all 202 berries instead of just 175. If you want to use dashless golden as a check, you are going to need traffic blocks and springs. You do not need dash crystals. But what else is in Chapter 1? Well, outside of the springs, the traffic blocks, and the dash refills, the only other mechanics in here are blue and pink cassette blocks. So if I go here, there should be a setting that allows me to just give myself an item. Okay, yeah, there we go. /send Celeste traffic blocks. With traffic blocks, it's pretty easy to see how you can get through this area. And then you can get over here and do the crystal heart. And there's obviously a strawberry right next to it. So okay, you can fling yourself up with this traffic block now that you have them. And it's pretty easy to see how you get this strawberry. However, what about this? Well, you've got a few options. Having either pink or blue cassette blocks can make this section easier. Blue makes it really easy, pink just makes it a little bit easier. But having neither, do you think it's still possible to get this? Well, we have seen in the past that you can cling onto the side of a wall if you demo dash into it and then uncrouch and turn around. It's probably possible to do that here, right? Right. And that's all you gotta do. It is pretty precise. It's honestly one of the most difficult tricks in Chapter 1A for Archipelago. Because, like, most of the tech is just, hey, you can hyper. It's not that difficult. But this jump right here is probably about as hard as it's gonna go. God, can I get it twice? I'll also take a moment to mention that you can't get across this gap with just a hyper, though you might be able to do it with a hyper bunny hop. It looks kinda close, but I'm not sure on that one. There. So I think if you go from this pixel, no, maybe it was sub-pixel dependent. That sucks. It's definitely not the most consistent trick, but it works, and that's what matters. If you have traffic blocks, you can get that even without the blue and pink cassette blocks. Okay, can I dash? There we go. Obviously the last check, you don't actually, it doesn't become any easier by having traffic blocks, because the only mechanic in there was the dash crystals. So, as far as I'm aware, you need dash crystals for this, you need traffic blocks for the ones I just got. And as mentioned before, if you want to do dashless golden as a check, then you need both springs and conveyors, because as far as I can tell, there's no way to get through this room without both. You can get pretty far without springs, though. So that's great, right? And we got stopped by not having traffic blocks in the other two sides, right? So if we go back into Forsaken City B-sides, the only thing that's changed is that we've got traffic blocks now. So how much easier is that going to make it? Well, honestly not as easy as you might expect. I mean, first of all, it's still a B-side, so it's still going to be pretty difficult to play inherently, but B-sides are a lot better at using their gimmicks and forcing you to use their gimmicks. I did not want to get that. Is there a way I can delete an item off a player? No. Okay, well, that sucks. But like right here, you can see that this wants you to use both a traffic block and a dash crystal to get through. Now we already know that we need we already need traffic blocks to get this far, but is there any way to avoid using a dash crystal? I don't really know, to be honest. I can't really think of one off. Well, as nice as that is, that's only possible if you have stamina, which you very well might not. Well, never mind, you can totally just do that. Okay, so, like I said, unfortunately I got springs, so this is gonna be a little annoying, but as you can see, if I just do the same thing that I did in that last one, I can totally get through this one the same way. But also, another thing you can do is you don't actually need the spring at all if you just do this section really fast. Like that. If you're fast enough, you can just avoid that entirely. And then there's a bunch more traffic block rooms, but then we get to this. And first of all, I've got a spring here. So you normally wouldn't have this if you were saying that you don't have any checks, which makes it a bit harder for me to gauge exactly where you'd be able to jump off of, but I think it's pretty cut and dry that you can't do this. Like, the best thing you could do is, if this spring wasn't in the way, you could do, like, a hyper, but that's not gonna get you enough height, even if it were on, 2 blocks over. So we were able to get pretty far into the B side without anything other than traffic blocks. What about the C side? Well, I mean, here's the thing. I know that Chapter 1C is actually possible dashless. It's very difficult, like ridiculously hard, but I know that it's doable because someone modded in a winged golden strawberry and then they collected it. I think that was actually somewhat recently, but at least as far as I'm concerned, I can't do this room without dash crystals, and it's what was stopping us in the other one anyways. So let's /send Celeste dash refills. Get through the seaside a lot easier. Again, you technically don't need these. And you can get to this binocular for a check. And then the only thing in this room is the traffic blocks, so obviously the only thing you need is the traffic blocks. And, by extension, you can get to this room. But do you see this? This is a touch switch, and touch switches are pretty much the bane of Archipelago Celeste. Because a lot of times you will be completely blocked off from the other side. Sometimes there will be gaps that you can use. Like there's one in Chapter 4 that comes to mind. I think the speedrunners do that. But as far as I can tell, this is as far as you can get. The one idea that I do have, that I haven't tried yet, is maybe it's possible to get your dash back doing that. Because I know I've done that on 3 block wide platforms. It might be possible on 2 block wide ones. Even if not, it may be possible to just hyper. Though maybe a reverse hyper would be better there because of the limited space. That said, I cannot time that for the life of me. Okay. So you can get here with a dash, which actually I think just means that the level's possible. So, while I am very much so struggling to perform it, the idea is there, and you should be able to beat 1C with just traffic blocks if you're tracked, or traffic blocks and dash crystals if you're not. Because this is the final jump. That gets you to the crystal head. No touch switch is needed. But now, if we want to actually beat the B-sides, we're going to need the dash wait, I gave myself dash refills. Never mind, I'm stupid. So yeah, we have dash refills now. So the question is, there's 3 other gameplay elements in Chapter 1B. There's pink cassette blocks, blue cassette blocks, and springs. How many of those are necessary? So I already showed a way to do this room without the spring. I'm just gonna do it with the spring to save time. But coming up pretty soon is a room with a spring in it that I haven't beaten yet. Shame I can dash upwards. So yeah, that spring is absolutely not required, but there might be a different spring that is. Like this one? Well, you'd think, because you do definitely need to use your dash to cling onto this wall. I mean, I think 5-tile overhangs are technically possible, but they suck. So you'd think that... Oh. Huh. It's even easier than I thought it was. Yeah, see, I never thought that could reach. Well, that might be sub-pixel dependent, but I'll tell you what isn't. Double jumping. And then you can get to the dash refill. And... Whoa, whoa! Okay. Oh yeah, also you can totally wall bounce. Get to this room, which is basically just traffic blocks, so we already know they were required. But there is actually one other thing that I've neglected to mention, and that is checkpoint sanity. And after I get through this B-size, which I'm pretty sure I will be able to, barring the last room. Oh, by the way, I just have no idea what the intended route for this room is. I always just do that. With the exception of the final room, I should be able to get through this. But, if you're playing with checkpoint sanity, then you might not necessarily need the same checks as someone who isn't in order to beat a chapter. So we can get to the final room, but since we don't have either of the types of cassette blocks, it doesn't look very possible to get anywhere. Because even supposing that you'd get onto this and corner kick from it, you'd still have to dash over, so you wouldn't have your dash, and there's no safe ground to land on. In fact, I think you'd have to do another kick off of there. So you'd have to do all that, dash, then you wouldn't have your dash, and that's a bottomless pit. So what if you just had one of the cassette blocks and not the other? Well, since I can't remove items, you're just gonna have to take my word for it that it is possible to make it through with only blues, and that is left up as an exercise to the viewer to determine how to do for themselves. But pink cassette blocks, I am not sure whether or not it is possible to make it through this room without. I mean, with only them. My first inclination would be no, to be honest. You can land on it and get your dash back. Actually, that might be possible. Oh, that's definitely possible. You're just gonna need to get a bit of speed in a bit of a tight space. But you saw right there that I still had my dash at the end. which means if I would have used it, I would have made it. And just like that. And that is every check in Forsaken City. Now, for the most part, checkpoints didn't really matter. Like, we saw here that you were able to get to all 3 from the start with no items. But the same cannot be said for the B side. Now, I'm not entirely sure what the name of every checkpoint is, but I think it's something like Scrap Pit. Forsaken City B. Scrap Pit. Perfect. So I believe this is the last checkpoint of the B-sides. And we saw before that there were some checks in some parts of the level that you needed dash crystals for. The question is whether or not you need them for this section. You did need them in the previous checkpoint, but you might not for this one. So I'm gonna collect a dash crystal here, but I'm gonna make sure not to use the dash. And I'm not even using the stamina because I'm neutral jumping. So it was possible to get through that room without its dash crystal. And this room doesn't even have a dash crystal. Now this room does. So we're trying to avoid the dash crystal. We want to see if we can cross this gap without it. I'm not seeing any way to do it. Just by a look. Which, it is possible to cling on to this with momentum, and then you can jump with a little bit more upwards momentum than you would normally. But since it's the ascent and not the flinging, it's not a whole lot of momentum. So the only other thing that you might be able to do, and this would suck a lot, is you go from this and you try to get into the corner and kick off of it without burning your dash. Which is definitely seeming more on the difficult side. You can definitely get close, I'll tell you that much. But, point is, the idea would be that once you get into that corner and jump off of it. Which again, I'm still not sure is possible. But let's just say it is. What would the next step be? Theoretically, you should be able to see pop. And actually, now that I think about it, if you're able to get into this corner and jump off of it, you don't even need to do that. Because if you had a dash getting through there, you could just cling on to this and then jump normally. So, if it's possible to get past this first, oh, I guess the second input without dashing, then it is possible to do the whole room without the dash crystal. But again, I can't really be sure. I'm not really that great at the game, and I'm also definitely not good enough to be able to tell whether or not something is impossible until I do it. Alternatively, you might be able to do something with this. I doubt it, but that's just another idea. But either way, we'll just pretend that it is possible. There's still other rooms that you need to clear that have dash crystals in them, like this one. So if you were to do that room without a dash crystal, you need to get to the second one without dashing, which actually is possible. But you end up on the wrong side of it. That might not matter. It's iffy. I forgot. Okay, yeah, it's possible. Without the dash crystal for this room. I, of course, messed up the last jump, but I've already done it before. I don't need to do it again. I stood up twice. Well, they do say that the third time's the charm. Unfortunately, they lied for fun. Man, I suck at this room. How did I gold in this? Oh, come on! me through! First try. Alright, and then there's also check. Check? No. There's also a dash crystal in here that you'd have to get through without using. Which is possible. So yeah, as long as you can do that one jump without using your dash, then it would be possible to beat 1B with only traffic blocks and either of the cassettes. So long as you start from Scrap Pit. But with that, that explains everything in Chapter 1. And that will conclude this episode of You Are Not BK'd in Celeste's Archipelago Randomizer. Thanks for watching.